For the head of an engineering department, few events carry as much weight as a visit from the National Board of Accreditation, or NBA. Heads of departments often approach this visit as a subjective defense of their program's quality. They assume that a polished presentation or a general reputation for excellence will satisfy the visiting team. For Tier 2 undergraduate engineering programs, the accreditation process operates as a rigidly quantitative threshold system. There is no partial pass. Programs are sorted into one of three distinct categories: not accredited, a baseline 3 years, or the maximum 6-year duration. Securing that maximum 6-year award depends on meeting a rigid mathematical model. The personal impression made on a visiting expert is secondary. We are going to reverse engineer the specific parameters required for a 6-year accreditation, working backward from the final evaluator score to daily faculty hiring decisions. The evaluation rests on a rubric where a program is graded out of 1,000 total points across 7 specific criteria. A standard 3-year accreditation requires an aggregate minimum of 600 points. The 6-year target requires a significant structural jump to a minimum of 750 aggregate points. Reaching this threshold requires hitting precise point values across a multi-year timeline, rather than relying on general administrative performance. This diagram shows the breakdown of the 1,000-point evaluator rubric. These points are distributed across 7 distinct criteria blocks. Within this distribution lies a trap. The system isolates criteria 4, 5, and 6 as mandatory fields. Reaching the 750-point target is impossible if these specific fields, covering students' performance, faculty information, and facilities, are neglected. The rule is absolute. A program must score at least 60% within these 3 mandatory fields to remain eligible for the 6-year award. A single weak point in core student or faculty data caps an institution at 3 years, making high scores in other criteria areas irrelevant to the final duration. To secure those faculty points, we must look past the final score and move into the institutional hiring office. The student-faculty ratio, or SFR, acts as the primary choke point for the entire application. For a 3-year accreditation, the SFR must be less than or equal to 1 to 25. The 6-year threshold requires that ratio to tighten to 1 to 20 or better. This grid illustrates the timeframe concept the NBA uses, the current academic year, or CAY, alongside the 2 preceding years, CAY-1 and CAY-2. The NBA calculates the student-faculty ratio as an even average across all 3 of these academic years. This rolling 3-year average prevents institutions from artificially inflating their compliance with a hiring spree immediately before the evaluator arrives. To enforce that average, the NBA strictly defines the variables for students, denoted as S, and faculty, denoted as F. The student count must include all actual admissions, including lateral entry students, alongside the official sanctioned intake. The calculation for the faculty variable specifically closes loopholes regarding contractual or temporary hires. Contractual faculty only count toward the student-faculty ratio if they teach for 2 consecutive semesters on a full-time basis. These hires must also meet the qualifications prescribed by the All India Council for Technical Education, or AICTE, and undergo a documented selection process. The NBA's definitions of S and F ensure that standard temporary staffing maneuvers cannot meet the math required for a 6-year award. Beyond faculty quantity, the formula evaluates faculty quality through a Ph.D. multiplier. For a 3-year accreditation, 10% of the required faculty must hold a Ph.D., averaged over the current academic year and the year prior. As shown here, the 6-year threshold triples this requirement to a strict 30%, averaged over those same 2 years. Pursuing the 6-year award also triggers mandatory departmental leadership requirements. The head of department must possess a Ph.D. within the current academic year. The department must also retain at least 2 professors, or 1 professor and 1 associate professor, with a Ph.D. on a regular basis for 2 consecutive years. A 6-year accreditation demands a sustained, highly credentialed academic hierarchy rather than a mere volume of teachers. This foundational evidence is thoroughly verified during the final paperwork review and the physical visit from the NBA evaluator. Administrators often believe the 3-day on-campus visit is the deciding factor in the outcome. In reality, the evaluator primarily verifies a mathematical fate that has already been sealed. Because of rolling averages and Ph.D. retention rules, a 6-year accreditation is determined 24 to 36 months before the evaluator steps on campus. The hiring and admission data from previous years is permanently locked into the record long before the application is filed. A department cannot perform its way into a 6-year accreditation during a weekend. It must calculate its way there years in advance. This flowchart summarizes the full strategic blueprint as a linear path. The foundation is locking in the student-faculty ratio at 1 to 20 or better over a rolling 3-year window. The next step is sustaining the 30% Ph.D. threshold and maintaining a credentialed head of department over a 2-year period. The final hurdle is securing 750 aggregate points while meeting the 60% minimum for the mandatory criteria. The pre-qualifier form serves as the master logic gate of institutional strategy, rather than a piece of bureaucratic paperwork. True academic leadership means treating NBA compliance as a multi-year engineering constraint applied directly to faculty acquisition and student intake management.